give it a minute. Good morning, everyone. My name is Enrique Zuniga, and I am the Executive Director of the Post Commission. Today is February 1st, and it's 10 a.m., 10:01. And this is a meeting of the Subcommittee on Certification Policy that the Post Commission created a few weeks ago. I will be going through some housekeeping items because it's the first meeting of this subcommittee. There's not a chair currently, so I'm going through those procedural items. The agenda that the staff decided to post has been distributed, was posted, and is also part of the commission packet that is available on our website. With me today are the committee members, Commissioner Bluestone, Commissioner Calderon, and Commissioner Caserocian, and of course our General Counsel Ravitz, Outside Counsel Lon Povich, and Stephen Smith, the Director of Certification. The first matter on the agenda that the staff distributed is the designation of the chair. In anticipation of that, we felt which we would actually go through two slides that are included in the packet. I'm going to currently, in a minute, share my screen and go through those items to essentially highlight the duties of the chair and hopefully have an understanding of that going forward. So I'll share my screen in a minute. It's fair to say that I've called this meeting to order, by the way. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
Let me go to presentation. I'm sorry, I need one more minute. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, the agenda posted is the election of the chair, and then a discussion on the subcommittee, the purpose of the for the subcommittee, and some timeline considerations that we have as part of this process. Let me go through the first two slides that I mentioned just a minute ago. Just as a reminder, this subcommittee is a public body. It was created by another public body, and it's all subject to the open meeting law that is outlined in the sections in this slide. The chair normally will be in the position that I'm doing, chairing the meeting. By statute, they also need to be the ones to announce any remote participants. We don't have any at this time. They will also inform the attendees regarding about those recordings. And yes, this meeting is being recorded. The chair is also tasked with permitting speaking, requiring silence, or ordering the removal or somebody who might be participating who is disrupted. And when it comes to executive sessions, it is the chair that declares that certain criteria has been met in order to go into executive session. For the record, we don't anticipate that there will be the need to get into executive session for this subcommittee, as the charter or our purpose of this subcommittee which we will be getting into more details later, we don't anticipate it would be necessary. So in all, the chair conducts the meetings as well as sets the agenda. Some of the other functions of the chair as part of these subcommittees and any public bodies, where the chair may actually collaborate with staff or direct the staff to ensure that these requirements are met, are highlighted in this slide. That is also, of course, informing the Attorney General and our website of the location of those meetings, setting the meeting notices, ensuring that the topics are listed, and maintaining those notices and receiving notifications of intent to participate remotely and distributing those materials to the remote participants. Of course, the staff and any chair will address any technical difficulties involving remote participation, and as well as receive notifications to do those recordings. Review any executive session minutes. Again, we don't anticipate executive sessions, but it would apply to the minutes as well, and take certain steps in response to any complaints. When it comes to the duties that we believe would be most relevant to the chair, that we expect and hope to do as part of this subcommittee, are really the ones that I highlighted in the first section, and that is relevant to allowing participation from the public, and permitting others to speak when necessary, which is something we intend to do as part of this subcommittee, given the subject matter. So with that, let me stop sharing for now. As I mentioned earlier, we said the staff took a position that the first order of business was to elect a chair among the 3 members of the subcommittee, which are you commissioners. We, at this moment, would like to pause and see if there's any questions, procedural or otherwise, as to how we effectuate that happening.
So I do have a quick, so do we just, if someone is interested, or we just indicate that, is that?
Yes. We would ask that there be nominations. Individuals, each one of you can nominate somebody, can nominate themselves, and you would also then vote. A vote of 2 is a majority. In your case, there's only 3 members. Some of others that are present are non-voting. We're just presenting for your benefit. Commissioner Calderon, you have your hand raised.
I do. Thanks, Enrique. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else is interested, but I would like to volunteer to be the chair and nominate myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Casarosian.
And I would also be interested and would nominate myself as well.
Ooh.
So we'll all arm wrestle, Larry.
Come on, Hanya, go ahead.
Oh,
Put
gosh.
in.
What's your name?
No pressure. No, I believe in this circumstance that both of my fellow commissioners would be in a better position to serve as chair of this subcommittee. But I have lost my screen here for 1 second. Hang on. Okay. So does that mean that I would vote on?
You could do that.
Do we take a vote now? No, I assume
could-
that my fellow commissioners will each vote for themselves.
Should we
You
talk
also-
about why we think I mean, I don't know, it's up to,
That would help
I
me.
don't know how we do this. Do we talk about why we think we?
Yeah, procedurally, yes, procedurally, there would be, a time for questions or comments after any motions. With a nomination, you effectively have had one motion and there's been a second motion effectively. So I would open it up for questions or comments.
May I ask a question that would impact my vote on this issue? I mean, I think that, you know, my hope or my request for this subcommittee would be that that we expand to have a working subcommittee of, you know, maybe 8 to 10 members that are representative of, you know, the different stakeholders in this process. So for instance, the MPTC, chief of police, an officer. I would certainly like to include a member of the peer support network, and perhaps a physician or a psychologist who does the fitness evaluation, so that we have some of the information that we may need going forward. I guess I would ask each of you what your thoughts are on that particular possibility.
Did you want to go first, Marcia?
Sure. I think I actually thought that MPTC and some of the other stakeholders would automatically be part of it anyway. So I think that's definitely important, and I would support that completely. And I guess that's sort of a segue into why I've thought about why I would want to be chair, why, you know, I think I might be a good person for chair. And I think it's because we do have a very good and necessary representation for law enforcement between the MPTC participation, Commissioner Calderon, and on the commission itself. And I think that I'm not law enforcement, and I think that this subcommittee, or whatever I believe we'll call the subcommittee, would benefit from the balance of someone who's not law enforcement when we are for another perspective, because I think that the law enforcement perspective is very strongly represented, and it should be. But I think we also need to have a strong representation of someone who's not law enforcement for balance. So I do completely support that, and anticipate that it will be a good balanced working relationship.
Hanya, thanks for the question, because it's an important one. And I agree with Marsha on some of her points. And I think that I bring the balance on both sides of the table, and here's why. Surely you know a little bit about me. You've listened to my testimony on Beacon Hill. My reputation there and on this post is that I'm always open to everybody's opinions and everybody's concerns. And I am law enforcement. I have relationships and represented in testimony, again, in front of the legislature, in front of our body, on both sides of the coin, where I represent members from MAMLEO, from the JAGO, the Latino Officers Organizations. I run the Massachusetts Law Enforcement Policy Group, which consists of members from the District Attorneys Association, from the Chiefs of Police Association, from all ranks in law enforcement, patrol supervisors, again, chiefs. I bring a good working knowledge on how to run this group, where I not only chair the policy group, but I'm the president of the Patrolmen's Association, and we run our meetings based upon Robert's rules, which are the same rules that govern how we run our meetings here on the Post. I also have intimate knowledge of the peer support groups. I've worked and sent members through Hayden Duggan's program. I was intricate in passing the funding for the peer support network on the South Shore through the legislature 2 sessions ago. I have again, an intimate knowledge on the certification process, being a police officer myself. And undoubtedly, all three of us surely will do a good job in our role if we were to be chair. I just think because I have so much working knowledge, so much ability to run the meeting according to the rules and make sure that all stakeholders are heard at these meetings, I think that's why I would like to be chair and think that I would do a fantastic job at it. And I hope that to get your consideration on it.
Thanks. Okay.
Scott, are there other questions?
Behind you.
I know, Hanya, I feel that's why I do.
Well, I mean, I know, obviously, I know both of you quite well at this point, and I would just make the point that, you know, I think this role is an important one, given it's sort of the representation, the face of our subcommittee. But also, I would just point out that, you know, whatever we collectively determine and recommend, we bring to the larger commission. So we're sort of a small subset. And I guess, although I think you're both, I mean, either one of you, I think, would be wonderful in this role. I am leaning towards voting for you, Larry, because I do think that in terms of the credibility of our recommendations, that it will be helpful to have a police officer chairing this committee. So my vote would be for you, Larry.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yep. Enrique, can I have another moment?
Please.
Hanya, thank you for the consideration and for that thought process. I agree. No disrespect, Marshall, obviously, yes, I think the three of us are very close. You know, we've formed a good working professional relationship in the time that we've served on the post and the times that we have been able to speak off, you know, outside of these forums, have been beneficial to understanding who we are as people, as opposed to our roles here on the post or even our profession. So I want to say thank you for the consideration, and I'll do the best job that I possibly can. And please, if I'm doing something that we disagree with, please let me know. And whatever we decide as a panel to bring forward is exactly what we'll do. So I wanted to say thank you.
Okay, so with that, Mr. Chair, do you want me to proceed with the presentation?
I don't have access to your screen, so is someone going to walk us through the presentation?
I will.
There, and
I'm ready. If commissioners are ready, I'll share my screen. I'll walk through what we felt were the most important issues to consider for this first meeting. Some of the comments that you made, Commissioner Bluestone, you'll see we're addressing in some way relative to the need to have participation, including the MPTC. So, which by the way, I'm happy to know that they are in attendance as part of the webinar. So let me share my screen once again and go through the rest of the PowerPoint.
Mr. Director, sorry to interrupt you. So being the chair now and obviously taking over moving forward, should I be taking notes as we go here today? Am I going to be responsible for the minutes of this meeting or no?
No, you'll be responsible to reviewing the minutes when we prepare them. Just so you know, this meeting is being recorded as a reminder. Our staff will prepare the meetings, the minutes as part of that, you know, with the help of that recording. So there's really no need for you to do that for the purpose of the minutes. But of course, you're welcome to take any notes you want, and others feel free to do so.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so as is now clearly evident, the subcommittee members of the commission of this subcommittee that the commission created are the three of you. Even though there are other participants, it's only you. It's only the three votes that count. A reminder: this committee was set up to be in an advisory role. The idea is, of course, that you will look at the purpose and have the discussion that we'll get into in a few minutes, and bring back those recommendations to the full commission, as Commissioner Bluestone stated earlier, for them to decide. Like any other public body, the subcommittee may request and consider public comment and/or the participation of others. This is especially at the discretion of the chair of the subcommittee. I just need 1 second, commissioners, just to go go to something. Sorry, I had made notes and I have left them in my briefcase. So let me move on to the next slide. I wanted to get into some of the timeframes that we will be considering. This is especially timely because the statute granted certain officers some certification, some statutory certification. A lot of that is going to be expiring within the coming months. But I'll remind commissioners that everybody that was active on July 1 of 2021 was granted a statutory certification. Every academy that began graduating after July 1 of 2021 and before December of 2021 were officers that fell a little bit out of the statute, but post had to certify because they were not originally granted that certification. The law did stipulate that post begin certifying new academy graduates after December 1st of 2021. Those are 545 officers whose certifications essentially expire between January 1 and June 30th of 2025. As a reminder, the first round of recertification, when we started with all officers A through H, began on June 30th of 2022. So this is to show that the next round of certification begins as early as July 1 of this year. Those 169 officers that were not active at the time of July 1, 2021, and began graduating, and those officers that post did begin certifying in December 1st of 2021, begin to expire. Those certifications expire this year, and we need to plan for how to address that second round of certification. Again, as a reminder, there was about 8,700 officers with last names A through H that expired, that now expire on June 30th of next year. So we really have to plan for that wave. It is fair to say, by the way, that there will be a lot less officers that will need to be recertified of those 8,700 because there will be retirements between 2022 when we certify them and 2025. And I'm certain that there will be retirements because that's the nature progression, because every new officer coming in is graduating as part of an academy, and those graduations are happening throughout the year. So what we will see after June 30th of 2025, really after December of 2024, is officers getting their certification expired month to month. The point of all of this is that there's a small number of officers that we need to worry about their second round of certification as early as July 1. And there's a big batch of officers all active during July 1 of 2021, which certification expires next year. Again, as a reminder, all officers active on July 1 have that certification expiring according to their last name. I failed to mention in the previous slide that Post still has to certify officers Q through C as part of this year. All the statutorily granted certifications from officers with last names Q through C are expiring June 30th of this year. So the process that we set out to do when we began this process 2.5 years ago, is not completed. It's ongoing. So another one thought that I'll just leave here preliminarily is that in the long run, everybody will be certified on a weekly, monthly basis, because everybody has a certification according to their graduating time. And there's academies, graduating individuals at all times, or rather throughout the year. We will still have to deal with the wave of officers A through H, I through P, Q through Z, for a number of years, because those are the majority of all officers, all active officers. And this does present some logistical challenges that we have to plan for. We can tackle them, but they have to be planned for. One thought is, and this would not be something that we could do easy, and we would probably have to do by regulation, is whether the commission would want to converge everybody to a particular date by last name, like the statute suggested, including those on graduating academies, or get everybody spaced through the year by, let's say, matching their certification to their date of birth. This has huge implications in terms of logistical planning, because we will be interacting. It's fair to say that we will be interacting with agencies regarding their certification really on a regular basis. I'm going to get into some relevant statutory language, and again, I'm happy to take questions at any time, commissioners, from any of these. This is really not meant to be only a one-side presentation, but I did want to highlight that there's important statutory language that pertains to the process that we need to begin deciding. And that is that the statute includes the requirement to jointly establish minimum officer certification standards between the Division of Standards and the MPTC. In anticipation of the first certification process, the Commission discussed and voted on 2 documents. The first document was a plan for certification, and a second document were duly promulgated regulations for certification. Both documents have been included in the packet, and importantly, we highlighted relevant sections in those documents, the plan for certification and the regulations, that we felt were necessary and relevant to the discussion today. Of course, the discussion doesn't have to be finished today, but these are important issues and topics that the subcommittee, for the purpose going forward, would need to address. Now, I will give a quick overview of the certification standards that the statute requires. You are all very familiar with them. I'll just suffice to say that we've tried to group them into a couple of different buckets, because we believe that a few of these are probably really straightforward. They only need to be verified once. And of course, the statute is less clear, rather, it is less clear as to whether some of these things, some of these standards rather, have to be verified more than once when it comes to a particular standard. Needless to say, those have huge implications relative to verifying compliance for all officers that we have to certify. So I'll also mention that there's statutory language additional that's relevant. Individuals who do not meet the standards for certification that are outlined in the Commission regulations cannot be recertified. anyone who has been convicted of felony or is listed in the NDI, that is the National Decertification Index, as well as anyone who previously was employed in law enforcement and would have had their certification revoked by the Commission, are also barred from certification and recertification. These are important provisions in the statute because they clearly suggest that our duty to verify certain things is ongoing, is not a once and done, and that is the whole purpose of certifying individuals on a three-year basis. Of course, the level of involvement that we do or that we ask agencies to do could vary greatly, and that is the whole purpose of these discussions. I'll also highlight another key section in the statute regarding those recertifications, Section 4I. Well, after the section about the expiration of certification every 3 years, Section 4I in the statute stipulates that, or rather requires that the Commission to not certify an applicant for recertification unless they continue to meet the requirements of subsection F. And subsection F is what I highlighted in an earlier slide, that the statute sets as those minimum certification standards. So the key question for this subcommittee, and the one that's most timely given some of the planning that we have to do in anticipation of all those recertifications, is how does POST verify that every officer previously certified by POST continues to satisfy the requirements of subsection F. And I submit to you, commissioners, that the answer depends on the approach and your interpretation to those provisions, those 9 provisions that I highlighted earlier, and the work that we will require agencies to do on our behalf for compliance with the statute. So we decided to group, and this is only our view. It's all up for you to interpret. The certification standards that I highlighted earlier into 3 different groups. The easiest one is this slide. This category happens to be the first 3 requirements of subsection F. These standards clearly need to be verified only once. POST is not will not be verifying this. We have all of those verifications have been memorialized in our databases, etc. So anybody who has been verified that they are older than 21, went to high school or have an equivalent, and completed the basic training program, which is either the full-time academy or the Bridge Academy, has already completed those requirements. Where it starts getting a little bit more a matter of interpretation and ongoing is these following standards. The statute does say that it does require that the completion of a national and background check, which is standard number 5, and we could interpret that in a couple of different ways. It could be interpreted that it's a once and done. Anybody that has had a successful completion of a background check has passed it, or also, frankly, ensure that there's some compliance with let's say, the submission of disciplinary records that have been transmitted to POST, that we have them, and we understand that all of those disciplinary matters are up to date, which again could be corroborated every 3 years. There's also an alternative approach, which is to require that all agencies do some kind of verification of other individuals, veteran officers, upon the time or at the time of hiring. This would be to ensure that would-be hiring agencies understand the disciplinary history and the background of an officer if he came from a different department, and therefore it's something to consider as well. Maybe this is not exactly a standard that needs to be just done once and over. But again, there's mechanisms that we could go practically to try to ensure that this standard is being adhered to on an ongoing basis. I will also say that standard number 7, the possession of CPR, is typically maintained and verified as part of the annual in-service training that is administered by the NPTC or the NPTC approved academies. Where we get to standards that really merit further discussion, and I know we've had, the Commission has had those discussions in the past, are the following 4 standards. The successful completion of a physical and psychological fitness evaluation was something that we considered quite a bit the first time around. We, at the time, in order to address veteran officers who have been active at the time of the passage of the statute, we asked and corroborated whether an individual had a physical and psychological fitness evaluation at any time in their career. And when we got that verification, we said at the time that the standard would be met. Where we start to get, start to get trickier, frankly, is how to interpret this requirement on an ongoing basis. There's a lot that we can discuss about this. There's a few more slides on this in a few minutes. And there's a lot that we can hear from the law enforcement community or other stakeholders relative to how to enhance psychological and physical well-being as part of our goals going forward. Similarly, the statute did require the successful completion of an examination. At the time of the first time around, that examination was the exam that the NPTC administers as part of the basic training or the Bridge Academy. In a similar way, if this is a standard that we are of the view, the due commissioners are of the view that needs to be satisfied only once, that would be once and done. But if there are ways to examine, the understanding and fitness of police officers to continue to be in that profession, it's something that would be considered. By the way, I will mention here that there is a requirement of in-service training, typically around 40 hours a week, a year, that the NPTC and other NPTC approved academies conduct. We have been, and I have been reporting to the Commission that that's something that is a big focus of POST and the NPTC. There could be also the interpretation that this standard is met periodically or continuously, rather, through the in-service training process. Lastly, there is the successful completion of an oral interview. It is, again, I believe there's room to interpret this as being only once and done or ongoing, and we will discuss ways in which that could be effectuated. And in my view, of course, the ultimate test of good moral character and fitness for employment as a law enforcement agency officer is the wraparound that really merit for us to consider this on an ongoing basis. How we effectuate it, again, remains the key question. Whether we ask for an attestation like we did the first time around, whether we ask for any changes since the last certification and try to focus on those. What we deployed, when we did deploy both the oral interview and the determination of the good moral character and fitness, was this questionnaire. Commissioners will remember that it was 8 questions that ended up being initially that ended up being 6 questions. And again, it would be up to you to recommend to the full commission whether that process is repeated in some way, modified in another way, or interpreted as being once and done because of the wording of the statute. I will also finally mention, I only have one or two more slides before I turn it over to Attorney Ravitz, who is going to be walking through the second part of the presentation. But as an alternative to essentially individually analyzing each of the 9 criteria that I just walked you through, that criteria in section F, the commission, I believe there is room to interpret that subsection I, in other words, the one about verifying whether the officers continue to meet those requirements in subsection F, and other relevant sections in the statute. In other words, taking the statute more as a holistic directive and blueprint for enhancing policing, and focus more generally or grouping into essentially the 4 areas that these and all other directives in the statute really could be summarized by these four areas. One, I think, is clear and discrete, and that is enhancing and maintaining psychological and physical well-being. And there's many ways in which that could be effectuated. We've had a lot of discussion about how that must be done incrementally, and how even back when we issued the plan for recertification, we did not want to be doing this on a punitive way. Secondly, of course, there's a lot of language and directive in the statute related to the commitment of standardized and ongoing training, as referenced in, of course, the requirements of basic training, the one-time Bridge Academy process that will be coming to an end this year, and the commitment to in-service training. Of course, having a background free from any disqualifying conduct, implementing a process for progressive discipline, and in the event of certain misconduct, all of which we know we address currently, and I know you are very familiar with our standards process, our disciplinary process, which we have really up and standing and ongoing, and the general directive really of a determination of good moral character and fitness for duty as a law enforcement officer. Let me see. I think we had. I wanna pause here because the following slides are from here on will be taken by Attorney Ravitz. But let me ask commissioners if there are any questions or comments into anything that I have said or summarized. Okay, seeing none. Randy, are you? I'm happy to continue driving the presentation if you just wanna start going through it.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, that would be great. I'll just elaborate on some things that the executive director mentioned. One issue that he mentioned is whether a physical and psychological fitness evaluation needs to be completed once every 3 years. In other words, every time that an officer comes up for certification or recertification, or whether it's sufficient for it to be completed once at the outset of the officer's career, or when the officer first comes up for certification and then is deemed satisfied from that point on. Again, the statute says successful completion of a physical and psychological fitness evaluation approved by the commission. And later, the statute says that the commission shall not recertify any person as a law enforcement officer unless the commission certifies that the applicant for recertification continues to satisfy the requirements of subsection F. But that still leaves a question of, is the officer deemed to have satisfied it because they satisfied it that one time, or did they have to resatisfy it? And so one reason to conclude that the legislature might have meant that it only needs to be satisfied once is that they use the same language, successful completion of, that they used in other contexts, like successful completion of a high school education or equivalent, where I think most people would agree that they must have intended for that to be completed only once, not for someone to complete a high school education once every 3 years. So the idea is, if that language is interpreted the same way with the physical and psychological fitness evaluation, then that means the legislature meant for that only to be completed once. Next slide, please. But there are other ways of looking at the matter, and that's why it really presents a question of interpretation for the commission. So here are a couple of reasons to look at things differently and conclude that the legislature intended this standard to be satisfied each round. Elsewhere in the statute, in section 3A, the legislature authorized the commission to adopt regulations establishing a physical and psychological fitness evaluation pursuant to section 4 that measures said fitness to ensure officers are able to perform essential job duties. So that could be seen as saying that the legislature wanted to ensure a continuing ability to perform essential job duties, and thus a continuing evaluation of that throughout someone's career. Also, the legislature had already called for regular physical fitness evaluations through a previously enacted statute, which is still in the books, but it has not been fully implemented with respect to continuing officers. It's been implemented with respect to new officers, but there's no evaluation process that's been developed pursuant to that statute for continuing officers. So that's chapter 31, section 61A. So that would be a reason to conclude that the legislature does want reevaluation of physical and psychological fitness on a periodic basis. Next slide. Now, even if it is required on a regular basis, so once every 3 years, it could potentially be tailored to take into account an individual officer's age, years of service, and or specific duties. So maybe the answer is to have an evaluation once every 3 years, but the evaluation looks different as the officer proceeds through their career. Again, that's a policy question for the commission to decide. Next slide, please. Here's another issue. The statute lists as a certification requirement the successful completion of an oral interview administered by the commission. And the commission previously took the view that it could administer interviews by charging agency supervisors with conducting them, as opposed to, for example, requiring thousands of officers to come to the post-commission office for a sit-down. But one could look at this and conclude that what the legislature meant was for this standard also to be satisfied only once at the beginning of someone's career or when they first come up for certification, because the term oral interview suggests a standard job interview. That's what comes to mind. But there's another way of looking at it, and that is that term oral interview isn't confined to a standard job interview at the outset of someone's career or placement. police officers interview suspects, reporters interview news sources, for example. So then the term could be seen as referring to really a face-to-face performance review or similar conversation that needs to take place every round of certification or recertification. Next slide. Then there's a policy question regarding the character and fitness requirement. And that was the subject of a lot of discussion among the commissioners, and the commissioners might want to revisit any aspect of that. But right here in this presentation, I'll just highlight one aspect of that evaluation process that was built into the recertification regulations. And that aspect, as people might recall, essentially took certain things off the table in a character and fitness analysis by the agency or the division of certification. And what it provided is that unless there have been allegations of multiple instances or similar or related misconduct, or protocols adopted by the commission provide otherwise, something shall not be taken into account in that analysis if there was a decision in the officer's favor on it, or if there's an investigation or adjudication pending regarding that matter, or the officer received some discipline but has already complied and hasn't engaged in similar conduct, or it did not result in any kind of a disciplinary proceeding or court action, and there's no reasonable explanation for why. So the thinking behind that was that it calls into question the validity of the allegation. If nothing was done about it and there's no explanation for why, the question is, well, why are we hearing about it now? And then also if the allegation is not specifically or credibly supported. So that part of the regulations would say those things falling in those categories are not taken into account. But we've seen in practice a lot of questions come up about that, and a lot of difficulty in applying that. So the question is for the commission to decide whether you all still like that provision as it's worded, or would want to revisit that. Next slide, please. Now, also in evaluating character and fitness, the commission previously utilized questionnaires, and some questionnaires have been critiqued, as people know. They've been the subject of debate inside and outside the commission, and so it's worth taking a look at those questions again, and in considering whether to include or how to phrase some questions that were proposed or used at some point in time, but maybe not in the questionnaire that's now used for recertification. And so some of those questions dealt with personal interactions with the criminal justice system, domestic violence or neglect, bankruptcy, social media use, alcohol and cannabis use, and physical altercations. It's just a policy question for the commission to decide whether to ask questions about these matters, and if so, how to present. Next slide. Then another issue is in-service training. Right now, there's no question that under the statute, if somebody fails to complete in-service training, they can and should be administratively suspended by the commission until they complete that training. But then the question is, should that also be built into the recertification process? And the MPTC has expressed a view that it should be taken into account in recertification, in addition to the administrative suspension process. And it could be structured in such a way that an officer who doesn't complete in-service training is given a conditional certification with the condition that it be completed within a certain amount of time. And perhaps it could build in some other things, some exceptions, so that, for example, if somebody is in that situation, but they haven't satisfied the in-service training for a certain length of time, or they've had repeated violations, that then they're not given that chance and they're just not recertified. But again, a question for the commissioners. Next slide, please. One possible way of addressing a lot of these things is by instituting some type of performance review requirement for law enforcement agencies and spelling out what that would look like. And that could incorporate a lot of the types of things that we've been talking about. So it could say, for example, a performance review needs to include a physical and psychological fitness evaluation, a background check, an examination, check into whether first aid and CPR requirements have been satisfied, an oral interview, a character and fitness an evaluation, or anything else, or only some part of those things. And that could have other benefits as well, separate and apart from the recertification process. Next slide. And I think, Mr. Executive Director, if you want to handle that or ask someone else to.
Yeah, no, let me just mention real brief. This is the end of the presentation, but I'll just mention that other topics that that this subcommittee could take perhaps as early as next meeting are whether we need to re-examine the notification method regarding these renewals. There's been some discussion as to how we're notifying and how timely are people getting those notifications, including the concern about using personal mailing addresses. We should also come back at a future meeting and talk more a little bit about the self-sponsored background check, which is and the self-sponsored questionnaire, which is a long form that does not necessarily mirror the process for recertification, and as well as, of course, the input from MPTC and others relative to all of these important matters. But that was, of course, mentioned a couple of times before. So I think that's the end of the presentation. We could, of course, refer back to it if we need to, but at this time, let me stop sharing my screen and ask the commissioners, Mr. Chairman, if there are some questions or comments.
Mr. Director, I guess that I'll chime in at this point and just ask, so if I could ask my fellow commissioners to go through this packet again and come up with any questions, concerns, or input that we're going to go through on the packet, and then we'll talk about getting the next date and the next meeting. Is that how you want to proceed, Enrique?
Yeah, that would be suitable. As I mentioned, the idea was really to try to set up, put forth before you a quick overview of the issues that came up early on. I know there's input from others that would like to be heard on their views, notably the MPTC. We did not plan for them to participate at this very meeting. It's at your discretion if you want to invite anybody who might be wanting to participate, or we can leave that for the second meeting or the next meeting. I can mention one thing that one more point on the subject of physical and psychological fitness that we touched on, but let me just emphasize something. When we had those early discussions with the MPTC and some chiefs relative to this standard and whether it was ongoing or not, there was a lot of concern relative to us interpreting it on an ongoing basis. It's fair to say because there would be potentially a very high failure rate, depending on the standard. For example, if we were to adopt something like the Cooper test, which is what they administer at the beginning of an academy, the reality is that it would be something really very, very high when it comes to failure rate. But as Randy mentioned, it could be tailored. It doesn't have to be failed and done. We've had a lot of discussion in the past as to whether it doesn't have to be punitive. It could be including, for example, something that Randy mentioned in another context, the notion that we could issue conditional certifications on the condition that officer simply improves in general, or takes steps to improve their physical health, if that was something that the Commission wanted to recommend. What we're likely to hear in the near future, I submit to you, commissioners, is that a lot of these things like this would have a real cost to agencies. something that we have to be mindful of. There would be, you know, because there's all kinds of budgets and things like that. People will, you know, large and small agencies, large and small, will have concerns about that, and so we'll have to consider how and whether to increase, enhance, incrementally try to improve, and that will be certainly the subject of a lot of discussion going forward.
I didn't know if you wanted me to call Hanya or if you want to
Yeah,
continue.
yeah,
Director?
no, please do.
Yeah. Commissioner Bluestone,
Yep.
sure.
Commissioner.
So I think, thank you very much for that really wonderful overview. It was very helpful to be reminded of some of those details and to have the timeline and to sort of organize our discussion like that. I know that represents quite a bit of work, so thank you. I think there's sort of two concerns or two areas that I'd like to raise at this point, and one is just the efficiency of our process, and having been involved in some discussions earlier on about the certification process. I personally felt that the discussions got really bogged down and were very inefficient at times. And I think it would be ideal if we can think through how to make the process really efficient so that we can bring back some recommendations in a timely manner. The second piece that sort of I think about the most, and I think may turn out to be one of the most controversial aspects of our task, is this idea of the ongoing wellness, you know, physical and psychological fitness component. And although I understand the focus on the legal language to determine what the legislature's intent was, I personally think it would be absurd to think that the legislature believed that the fitness of a new young officer who's just coming into the profession would predict or be the same as the fitness level and the wellness level of an officer as they move through a long career in a very stressful profession. So I think that it's important for us to think about the common sense aspect of this task, which is not necessarily adopting a punitive model by any stretch, but thinking about how do we support the law enforcement officers in the Commonwealth in moving towards health and wellness, and what's the best way to go about doing that. And I think in the presentation, we sort of hear these two different approaches, one which sounds more authoritative or authoritarian even, where we're you know, using a punitive model to say, if you don't do this, you know, bad things will happen to you. And the other being this idea of more of a prevention model, where maybe there's some incentives to help officers to make some behavior changes that could improve their overall health and wellness. So that's something that I particularly care about. And that's one of the reasons I really hope that we will include some people in this discussion that really understand that aspect of our goal.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Enrique.
Commissioner, yeah, thank you for that. And I think one key takeaway from this presentation that we wanted to essentially portray was that you essentially have enough leeway and discretion and authority, frankly, to go either way, to be punitive, although I know you don't want to, and I don't think anybody would, or to have the discretion to really, you know, hear from others, best practices and whatnot, and figure out the best approach. Something that simply doesn't say, you know, we're done, but doesn't go on the other end, which is, you know, everybody fails if they don't meet certain standards.
Attorney Ravitz has his hand up. Enrique, want to let him speak?
I just wanted to note that in the packet is a copy of an initial plan for recertification that the commission adopted even before adopting the regulations. And there's some highlighted parts of that, and those highlighted parts really reflect a lot of themes that Commissioner Bluestone just articulated, and that the executive director has articulated about not being punitive, about giving someone a chance to get to where they need to be, and things like that. And those are things that obviously the commission could change if it wanted to, but at this point in time, that's a policy statement and a reflects a philosophy that the commission had at an earlier point in time adopted. So I just wanted to make mention of that, and as much for the public as for everyone participating.
I guess to chime in again, my initial thought process on how to proceed is naturally we want to be timely, as Commissioner Bluestone said. But my first inclination is to get input from the stakeholders, whether it be the MPTC, organizations that represent the sworn officers that are out there, and civilian groups that have their own opinions as to what some of these interpretations, recertification process, etc., need to be moving forward. So if there's anybody that's in the audience, Enrique, and they have a question, I apologize that I'm not seeing that, but I have no problem if anybody wants to speak at this time. But moving forward, I think that we should make sure that we get as much input as we can from anybody that wants to share their opinions and concerns, and then bring them to this committee to make sure that the three of us hash them out and discuss them thoroughly. Anya?
Yeah, I want to go back to my original request that we maybe think of having our subgroup include more people as part of the ongoing discussion, in addition to your suggestion of bringing in those, other stakeholders and their input. But could we think about getting some representation? And I think for me personally, I'd really like to have someone from the Peer Support Network like Tom Greeno be a part of this conversation.
We can definitely start working on scheduling the next meeting, and in anticipation of that, have those invitations. We can do the outreach, I'm sure people will be more than happy with a little bit of time to come in and present, either with a PowerPoint or simply a testimony, written or oral or both. We could certainly ask for that, and I'm sure there will be people more than happy to do that. They will also have the benefit, hopefully, of this meeting, which is recorded, and the packet, which has been posted to our website, this morning, like is typically our practice. What you just saw and the two other documents that were referenced, are already posted on our website.
Anya, I apologize. Did you have a name that you said at the end of the Peer Support Network that you were thinking about? Was there someone in particular?
Sure. Sure. The person that as I understand it, is sort of one of the leaders of the Peer Support Network is Tom Greeno.
Thank you. I thought you said a name. I just got cut off on it. Commissioner Kazarogian, I don't know if you have any thoughts.
No, I just, thank you. I think this sounds like a great plan going forward, just to pull in as many people as we possibly can to get information from every aspect, mental health, social issues. I think that's important because we have to weigh it all, from both the law enforcement perspective and the public perspective. So I think this is a great start. Thank you.
Mr. Director? Yeah.
I did want to ask Commissioner Bluestone, when you mentioned the efficiency of the process, were you referring to the subcommittee and the tasks ahead, like input from stakeholders, or were you also referring to how we deploy a questionnaire and how we ask agencies to fill it out and respond to us? Was there a reference to that aspect in your prior comments? Were you really just talking about, the tasks of this subcommittee?
I'm not sure I understand your question exactly.
So what we deployed initially, when we deployed the questionnaire, we asked agencies to do all these things, and they had to submit certain information. And frankly, the first time around, that wasn't very efficient. The second year, we got better because we now have an infrastructure. It's a portal. People are very familiar with it, and so the reason of these discussions is it's to get directive as to what we might need to change to make sure that we have enough time to make sure that that process continues to be efficient. When you make the decisions as to what questions we'll ask, we won't ask, that has to be implemented, and we're in a much better position than we were the first year to be efficient. Having said that, we have to plan for it, so it's timely. Before we deploy it, we want to make sure we make decisions in the short term, not immediately, so that we can make those modifications in our system, communicate with agencies who, have had a couple of times the process change on them. So, they need to also make sure we deploy it with ample time.
I think that there's some low-hanging fruit here that most of us would probably agree upon fairly quickly. And I think that's a good point, that we need to make decisions, and perhaps we can make some of the easier decisions, the ones that are more time sensitive, quickly, and leave some of the more challenging discussions for later, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're saying, but I do see some things here that I think would probably be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I was I just wanted to mention that there's two ways in which we need to be efficient: the designing and the implementation. And if you're meaning both, I just wanted to kind of make that distinction.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm speaking more, to kind of an area that I feel like I have more, personal experience with. So I understand that there's a bigger picture as well.
So can I, Commissioner Kazaroshi, and if you agree, can I suggest that for our next meeting, we all digest the packet that's in front of us that we just went through, that we received. We can ask Enrique, the appropriate people, to send out invitations as we normally do, proceeding by the law, and be prepared to discuss all the topics, but for our commissioner panel, the subgroup, be ready to decide what we consider the easier pieces. I agree with you, Hanya. I believe there's some things that the three of us will agree on right away, whether to change or not to change, or to modify. So if our next meeting, we can be prepared to do that, and send out the invitations, maybe after we have our discussion and agree on the topics that we all confirm together, we can take some input from anyone in the public that wants to ask questions or give their concerns. If the two of you agree with that, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I mean, we know certain groups that we've already targeted that we want to have input from. I don't know, like the public, how are we going, do we know who or what groups we're going to specifically reach out to? Because I think that's important too, to know in advance, and so that we can look at it and say, what, I think you might want to include so-and-so, or so maybe we can somehow be able to, I don't know, can we do this? Look at the list of who the stakeholders are that we think should be included, and if we think somebody or someone or some group is missing, we can suggest that they be added.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer to Enrique and Randy on that, because I know that we send out public notices, and I know that at least for the policy group, I send them notifications and just send the link that goes out from the post each time we have a meeting. But if one of you can answer me, what's the best way that we can do that to make sure that we don't leave anybody out? Because Marsha's right, we don't want to leave someone out and have a complaint later. Lon? You're on mute, Lon.
Sorry, obviously you can do it anyway, but you can do it serially too. You can invite people who you think would be interested, and then before you're all done, you could have an open forum, not a strict public hearing, but you could publicize this is what which we're going, and what do you think? So
Oh, okay.
I think it all has to be at the next meeting. I think it can be somewhat serial, but I would suggest that at some point you just have we used to call as a kid an ollie ollie in free, where everybody can come and give their piece, and that way, before the commission gets to the point of doing a regulation, you can have public input at this level.
Okay. And I believe that game was Relivio. Ollie Ollie entry. I'm aware of that game. Thank you though. That well put. Commissioners, you okay with that? Perfect. Okay. Enrique, I don't know if you go ahead. Yep.
Well, you made a comment just a minute ago about whether you wanted to have questions at this meeting or especially later, and we turned the conversation into later. I just wanted to mention that the Q&A function in this meeting is enabled. I should have mentioned that early on. And if anybody if you wanted to ask people who wanted to participate today, you could have that. It would be at your discretion whether you wanted to have some of the attendees ask if they wanted to participate.
Okay. I clicked on it as you said it was available. I don't see anyone in there unless somebody else corrects me. I don't see any questions that are there. But for anybody that is on and they have one, if they want to put it up quickly, we'll try and answer it. And if not, if they could read the packet that we just went through and either forward questions to the three commissioners and anybody on this panel, that'd be great. Let us know if they intend or want to be invited to any conversations that we have. That would also be helpful to us. Other than that, I don't see any questions popping up in the queue.
Just Randy.
Just a housekeeping matter, I just don't want to forget that because all the members are participating remotely today, if there were to be a vote even to adjourn, it needs to be by roll call. And in fact, any votes taken during a meeting in which a member participates remotely shall be by a roll call vote. So just wanted to make that point.
Yes, sir. Mr. Director, other than that, unless somebody has matters not anticipated at this time, and I know we just had the chair nomination, so I don't have anything unless either of the commissioners do. No, Mr. Director?
No, that concludes our the topics that we wanted to present.
Okay.
So do we need a motion to adjourn?
I was just gonna do
Okay.
so. If you want to do it, I'll second it. And
All right.
and Randy, who's doing this roll call vote? Is it me?
Yes, you can do so, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So Commissioner Bluestone? Motion to accept the adjournment? Yeah. Commissioner Casarossian?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So, I just want to say, Hanya, thank you very much for the confidence in the vote, and I'll do the best that I can. And obviously, Marcia, please, keep me in line and give me input. And it's a 3-person team here, along with all other staff that's with us. Obviously, we can't do this without anybody that's on the screen. So thank you very much. Appreciate
I
it.
just want to tell you, you have my complete confidence and support as well. So just so you know that. Just don't
Thank
get
you.
out of line.
I did. So thank you.
You do. I
appreciate it.
sincerely do.
Okay.
All right, great.
Other than that, everybody have a good day, and we'll send out notifications and hope to talk to everyone soon.
Good meeting. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Commissioner.
Thank you.